Henry realized that it was time to get up as soon as the timid rays of the sun penetrated through the loosely drawn curtains. Despite the fact that it was his day off, the man decided to be productive instead of lying in bed till noon. He wanted to go to the hardware store to get supplies for renovations for his rundown house. Henry was 35 years old. He lived alone, but he already had a failed marriage in his past. The man preferred not to worry about it too much and always tried to keep a positive outlook on life. His marriage to Jessica was doomed to fail from the very beginning, but it only became clear 5 years after the wedding. The couple's life goals and desires turned out to be too different to them to be able to find family happiness together. Henry dreamed of having children, while all Jessica wanted to do was live a rich life and have a husband who'd attend to all of her whims. It was Jessica who initiated the divorce when she got completely disappointed in life by her janitor husband. Henry couldn't provide her with unlimited cash because the man was living paycheck to paycheck. Since the couple had no assets to divide, the divorce was relatively painless. As it turned out later, Jessica didn't waste any time and found herself a wealthy oil man who could fulfill her wild desires even before she filed for divorce. Henry managed to keep his cool during the entire divorce process, refraining from starting any fights or causing any scenes. The man directed all of his energy to his work in order to distract himself from the sad thoughts and the feelings of loneliness. And now, instead of sitting aimlessly in front of the TV on his day off, Henry decided to use his free time productively. The hardware store was located about a half a mile from the man's house, and taking a little walk in the morning was just the right thing for Henry. He headed for the store, singing a simple song under his breath, which cheered him up with its catchy tune. Suddenly, the man's attention was attracted by a squeaking sound. At first, Henry thought that the sound was coming from the nearby shop where a group of teenagers was showing off their brand new smartphones. But having listened more carefully, the man realized that the mysterious sound was coming from the neatly trimmed lilac bushes. Henry bent down and carefully parted the branches. Someone's small, wet nose immediately touched his hand. "Oh, it's a puppy!" the man exclaimed, pulling the animal out of the bushes. The puppy was trembling with fear and looked at Henry with his sparkling, beady eyes. Pieces of dirt and debris were stuck in the puppy's fur, which indicated that he had been living on the street for quite some time. "You must be hungry. Let's go home and I'll get you some food," Henry whispered, changing his plans on the spot. On his way home, the man bought the puppy a carton of milk and about a pound of dog food. Henry put the puppy inside his coat and quickly walked towards his house. Although it wasn't far away, the puppy still managed to fall asleep, having gotten warmed up by his savior's body. When they got home, Henry took his old jacket and made kind of a bed for the puppy out of it, and then the man started making dinner for the little animal. Having smelled the warm milk, the puppy immediately woke up and started devouring the treat, grumbling contently. The animal ate so greedily that Henry couldn't hold back his tears. The puppy moved away from the bowl only when his noticeably rounded sides started to resemble a rugby ball. "Well, that's better. Now take a little rest and I will bathe you soon," Henry said with a smile. The puppy barked loudly and wagged his little tail as if to express his agreement. Henry decided to name him Chip in honor of one of the cartoon characters he liked back when he was a kid. The puppy's appearance in the single man's life changed it for the better. Now, Henry hurried home after work so he could feed Chip and take him out for a walk in the park. The puppy liked to chase pigeons and bark at the squirrels that teased him, hiding high in the trees. Thanks to good nutrition and proper care, the puppy grew leaps and bounds. Looking at his paws and body get stronger, Henry said, "Oh wow, it looks like you'll grow into a real giant soon." Thanks to his owner's great care, Chip didn't just grow up big, but also smart. The dog never barked for no reason, so Henry knew that Chip wouldn't give him any trouble when they went out for a walk. But what Chip enjoyed doing most of all was playing with a baseball, which he brought back to his owner after each throw. Surprisingly, the dog was smart enough to never clench his jaws too hard, so as to bite through the ball and thereby ruin his favorite toy. Time passed, turning Chip into a tall, lean, handsome dog with long legs and a powerful chest. At the sight of Henry walking by with the dog, people on the street raised their thumbs up approvingly and followed them with envious eyes. Chip seemed to be very happy, living in a warm home with a loving owner. But the dog could hardly have known what awaited him in the near future. As we all know, trouble always comes suddenly, and that was exactly what happened to Chip and his master. It was raining badly on that fateful day, which was why Henry decided to take his car to work. As if feeling that something bad was going to happen, the dog kept whimpering softly and trying to push the owner away from the door to make him stay home. "What are you doing, Chip? Don't worry, okay? The weather is bad, so there won't be as much work today. I'll be home soon," Henry said, patting the dog on the withers. Unfortunately, people can't feel what their pets do in moments of danger. When Henry got into his beat-up Ford, Chip raised his head to the sky and howled plaintively, as if informing the neighborhood about the imminent danger. "That doesn't seem right." The man shook his head and started the engine. If he had turned around at that moment, he would have seen the tears that froze in his pet's eyes. Watching the owner's car leave, Chip obediently laid down by the door and started waiting for his return. All the odds were against Henry Nelson on that tragic morning. The combination of the slippery, rain-soaked asphalt and the drunk truck driver who drove into the oncoming lane was very unfortunate. Despite the fact that they avoided collision at the very last moment, Henry's Ford flew into a ditch and rolled over several times. It looked so terrible that the rescuers that arrived at the scene doubted whether the owners of the mangled car was even alive. But when Henry was pulled out of his vehicle, it turned out that he was still breathing. Knowing full well that every minute was important, the paramedics immediately hooked Henry up to the artificial respiration machine. That day, Chip's master never returned home. Henry didn't come back the next day either, nor did he come home in 2 days and even a week. All this time, Chip was eating dog food, which was stored in a large bag in the backyard. The neighbors also helped make sure that Chip didn't starve. They kept bringing over food for Henry's intelligent and loyal pet. But Chip wasn't worried about food as much as he was worried about his owner. Of course, the dog couldn't have known that at that very moment, his owner was lying in a hospital bed in a state of coma caused by the brain injury he sustained in a car crash. Since Henry Nelson was an orphan, it was only the hospital staff who took care of him and tried to help him come to his senses. At first, the medical staff chipped in to make sure that their comatose patient had everything he needed. But time passed, and Henry didn't seem to be getting any better. As it was getting more and more difficult to keep the patient alive, the management suggested that it could be time to take Henry off of life support. Of course, the doctors didn't make this decision lightly. However, there were many other patients at the hospital who also required treatment, and therefore the doctors couldn't continue to spend too much time on Henry's care, especially since it seemed that it wasn't working. Out of all the medical staff, Nurse Megan Simpson was the only one who voted against taking Henry off life support. The nurse grew attached to Henry during the time she was taking care of him. Of course, Megan didn't develop any serious feelings for the patient. She treated him as her late brother, who died several years ago in a similar accident. Unfortunately, one nurse's opinion couldn't convince the doctors who gathered to make such a difficult decision. At that very moment, Chip suddenly felt an inexplicable panic attack that made him take off and rush towards the highway. The neighbors looked at the distraught dog in bewilderment and shook their heads. The poor fellow is probably very tired of living alone. He must have decided to run away in search of a new master. But Chip had a different goal. The dog followed the inner call that came from the depth of his loving heart. Chip didn't know how he managed to find the hospital where his owner was getting treatment. Perhaps it was an innate instinct, or maybe it was a simple coincidence that didn't allow the dog to get lost in the city and find the right place. Whatever it was, Chip burst into the hospital room just at the moment when his owner was about to be taken off life support. Having covered Henry with his body, the dog growled dully, making it clear to everyone that he wouldn't give up without a fight. The doctors froze in fear, and only Megan smiled at the dog, mentally thanking him for his determination. The medical staff didn't know what to do in such an unusual situation, but they realized that they needed to do something right away. The silent scene lasted about 20 minutes, after which the monitors by Henry's bed suddenly started making all kinds of sounds and flashing with green lights. Dear God, that's just impossible. He's waking up. A whisper swept through the room, while the doctors simply froze in shock. As if realizing what was happening, Chip licked his owner's hand and barked softly. Henry's eyelashes started moving, and then he slowly opened his eyes. Still unable to understand what was happening, the man coughed softly and whispered, "I had a wonderful dream. I was walking through a long, dark labyrinth and couldn't find my way out. And then I heard a dog barking and went towards the sound." After Henry's words, every single person in the room had tears in their eyes. Meanwhile, Chip proudly sat next to his owner, licking his hand from time to time. The dog's instincts turned out to be more correct than the opinions of the doctors of all the medical tests. Henry was discharged from the hospital about a week later, and his pet couldn't be happier about it. Megan helped Henry during the entire rehabilitation period. Deep in her heart, the woman was sure that she made the right choice in life and found her true love. Such a development made Chip incredibly happy, as he would now have 2 loving owners instead of just 1. To end this beautiful story, it feels appropriate to note that animals always remember the kindness and repay for the good done to them whenever they get the chance.